All right. So, welcome everybody to this is now the second episode, whatever we want to call it, of the Ancient Wisdom series. Today we are with Jessica Sharp. She is a Reiki practitioner and she is the owner of Gentle Hands Reiki. She is local to the Laurel, Columbia area. However, right now she is doing distance energy work due to COVID. So, without any further ado, welcome, Jessica, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I'm so glad to get to hang out with you in this kind of format.
Yeah, this is our first time meeting.
Yeah,
So,
meeting in face to face, seeing each other's faces.
yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you that obviously already know me and know that I'm practiced out of Nourishing Journey in Colombia, we can thank Jessica for suggesting that place to me. Yep, I reached out to her. COVID was still here, and I was like, oh, let me just throw a shot in the dark, and she guided me to Nourishing Journey. So I'm always grateful to her. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad it worked out so well.
Yes, yes, yes. It's great. Okay, so obviously, this is the Ancient Wisdom Facebook group. And the first question that I like to lead with is just asking our guests, Jessica, what is your idea or belief on bringing these ancient practices and finding some way to apply them to our modern lives?
I love this question. And I think that without kind of bringing these techniques and these skills and all of this incredible wisdom into the healing practices we do today, we they got us this far, so there must be some value.
Yeah.
um, you know, it would be kind of, glib to look at when modern medicine was developed in, let's say, like the 18th century, when people started dissecting dead bodies and saying, okay, this is a body and this is what this does. All of our, I don't want to say all of it, but a lot of our knowledge about how systems work in the modern way came from understanding what was dead. And we don't necessarily have an understanding of what animates life, and to leave out or to cut out and cut away all of this wealth of ancient wisdom would be like cutting off a piece of ourselves. This is in us. It's Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes calls it the holy apothecary that's already within us. And I think there's just incredible value to I'm thinking, like, what a time to be alive. Like, we get to actually like talk about this and come out of the closet with it a little bit and not be considered like, pariahs or anything like that. It's a really exciting time.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, like this ancient wisdom, holistic healing, that was the norm until not that long ago when colonizers basically were like, nope, we have Western medicine now. And it was illegal in a lot of places. It became taboo, weird, woo woo,
Mhm.
all that stuff. And so the fact that we live in a time where we do have a piece or pieces to these ancient practices paired with the advances in Western medicine, it couldn't be a better combo in my opinion. But the idea is combo, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I just think that there's a lot of mistrust and skepticism when it comes to talking about ancient practices. And so that's also part of my idea of why I want to do this. It's like our ancestors were doing it like this. They were living. Maybe, they were dying from common colds, but they were doing this thing on earth, right? And so yeah, so thank you again for that. Like I said, Jessica is a Reiki practitioner. So I'm just going to let her kind of guide us through the beginnings of Reiki, and how we can modernize it today and use it today. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I've been so excited to answer this and talk about this, because Reiki, in terms of energy modalities, if you're going to compare it to some of the older ones like acupuncture, it's relatively new. It's like a baby on the scene. Reiki basically involves a practitioner, if they're in person, placing their hands on a person's body or hovering them a few inches above the body. If someone's working distantly, which is possible because it's energy work, which happens in the quantum realm, not the physical realm, um, then then they're obviously not touching. But the basis is the same, that the practitioner is channeling divine energy, loving source energy through their own body and into the body of the client. And what that does is, I mean, from a scientific perspective, it's working with the parasympathetic nervous system. So I'll just kind of give a baseline before I get into like the history of it. So we have our sympathetic nervous system. It's like coping and doing and action and holding all the things and holding the stress. And then we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and digestion and cell reproduction, immune response, all that stuff. They cannot work in tandem. They can't work simultaneously. So the sympathetic has to relinquish a bit of dominance and allow that parasympathetic to kick in. So Reiki, in channeling this energy, the first thing it does is kind of tells the sympathetic nervous system, okay, honey, it's time to have a seat, and let this other system play for a little while. And then once that's engaged, we can begin to kind of like sweep out some of this like stress energy, trauma, all these different like blockages that get held in fascia and tissue and organs. It also works. I mean, I work with the chakra system like you. I think that it's just so gorgeous and offers such an amazing understanding of people's individual bodies. So I'm also working to kind of like clear out and open chakras. Um, that said, Reiki is only 99 years old. It was developed in 1922 by a Japanese Zen Buddhist monk who was also a doctor, Dr. Mikei Ayusui. And so I think, I mean, if you're going to understand Reiki at all, you have to understand it from a framework of ancient wisdom, because otherwise you run the risk of saying like, oh, well, divine energy came to be at the same time as Reiki in 1922. And before that, it was like a vacuum of nothing. Like, it's like you can't
Yeah.
do that. So Reiki, when I talk about it, I'm telling people that like, it's just the latest iteration of what human beings have been doing since they've existed on earth, which is to put your hand where it hurts. And
Mm-hmm.
I also, I mean, I love that you mentioned like the colonization of ancient wisdom and how it was, you know, tried to be eradicated. And that's another thing I tell, especially when I'm teaching children. I'll tell them like, you know, this used to be taught all the time. If we were living 1,000 years ago, I wouldn't be teaching you this because it would be something that you learned in the home from birth.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, over the years, it's been chipped away at and called witchcraft or voodoo or evil, or sometimes it's called magic. I don't think of myself as a magician. I just tell somebody like, if you want to call it magic, you can call it magic, but magic's something that never should have been taken away from you. Like that's your birthright.
Mm-hmm.
So um so it helps to, I mean, you cannot understand Reiki without looking at it from what have we already modernized as Reiki practitioners from ancient wisdom. But where it gets really interesting is that, okay, 1922, 23, these techniques are developed by Dr. Usui, and he was channeling energy into people's bodies. He was very intuitive. He developed lots and lots of different protocols of where to put hands for things like kidney disease or liver cancer. I mean, if you look through his notes, he took copious notes and, you know, it's like, here's how to do the things. Um, but since that time, in the last 99 years, people have said, oh, wow, look at this wonderful way that you can understand energy. Look at this wonderful way that you can channel it through a person's body. However, he didn't use the chakra system, for instance. He didn't go to traditional Chinese medicine and incorporate the exact meridian systems. A lot of the protocols line up, but not like to the degree that he was like, here, let's use the traditional Chinese medicine system. He developed his own protocols. But there is a lot of dogma and gatekeeping in the Reiki. community,
Yes.
just like there is in so many other religious communities or even Western medicine. You'll find it, like, I've gotten pushback, I've gotten like called out because I do work with the chakra system, and I'll say, here's how this, I'm incorporating these Reiki techniques, and then also I understand it through the chakras. They give me a lot of information, and somebody's like, you still never did that. And I'm like, I don't care, because if
Right.
I have a wealth of information sitting here that's available to me, I'm not going to say, well, that guy didn't use that, so I can't use that. Excuse me. I'm just going to push that aside and not,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be crazy. Then another thing that happens is, like, I didn't set out when I studied Reiki to start to begin to see spirit guides or animal spirits or flashes of memories that people were having or anything like that. Like, there was not a whole lot of imagery at first for me, and it wasn't like something that I desperately wanted or needed. It just started happening.
Hmm.
There's a lot of practitioners, I don't want to say a lot, but there are some practitioners who are like, no, spirit guides, we don't work with spirit guides. That's not Reiki. That's something completely different. And I feel the same way. It's like, if I'm going to keep myself in this box and say, well, if I'm a Reiki practitioner, I have to do it like this. And then some spirit guide comes in, I'm not going to be like, excuse me, no, thank you.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
like, you're not invited. Like, I'm not gonna say that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, as I said, like, dogma and gatekeeping serves nobody. It certainly doesn't serve our clients. I think the only people that it might serve are like practitioners who just feel the need to over control. And it's
Yes.
really interesting. And I
Yes.
don't mean to keep talking over you, but I'm just
No,
like,
go
oh my
for
God,
it.
so let
This
me
is
say.
all you.
But what is just so ironic to me is that, you know when we have this kind of, like, narrow hallway of understanding of, like, this is all it can ever be. It's so ironic that, like, that's exactly what we're working with clients to unpack. We are helping them break out of this stringent mold of, this is the only way I can human, and, like, discover the fullness of their soul and the fullness of their humanity. Yeah, so if we're doing it from a place of, but it can only look like this, then we're just robots. Then we're
Robots,
exactly.
trying to squeeze ourselves into a mold that not everyone fits into. Episode one was actually about Dharma and how modern times don't really cultivate a space for people to really dig into their Dharma. And so, yeah, when we talk about ancient practices, there's this pull to preserve the history of it, which I get. Um, but then it lacks sometimes the evolution. So if we look at Western medicine, if we did the same thing, I mean, in the 60s or 70s, they told us that it was safe to smoke while pregnant, you know?
Yep.
And we're not like, hey, pregnant lady, but they said in the 60s and 70s or whenever, it was safe. They said that, right? Like info can evolve. And I think that with ancient wisdom and ancient practices, there's definitely a framework for it. Um, but I don't see why evolution can't also be a part of it too. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think that kind of scares people when they go into learning these kind of modalities. They get scared by the boxes.
Yeah,
Like, but that doesn't fit in there, or, but I like Reiki, but I also like the chakra system, but I'm also into Ayurveda, and that's India, and that's not Japanese. And, so it's like, why not just bring them together when it's appropriate?
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And that's why, like, as I teach other practitioners, like, I'm teaching other Reiki masters, I tell them, you don't have to do it the way they do it. You don't have to do it the way I do it. I mean, you can think the way I do it is wrong and you can throw it out the window. You are going to be such a better practitioner if you find what works for you and
Mhm.
blend in what works for you. And there's going to be a client out there, probably a lot of clients out there, who want exactly that combination of skills.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jessica, tell me if you agree with this or not. So I took a Reiki 1 course, and I was just interested because I really didn't know how Reiki worked, and I just wanted to kind of get a feel for it. And so I'm not a Reiki practitioner, people, just letting you know, but I did take a course, and it was like everyone here has at one point practiced Reiki, as you know, especially if you're a parent and your kid falls and then they're like, ow, and you put pressure and you touch the place where they got hurt, that is Reiki, the healing touch, right? So,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. It's people think I do get asked a lot. Well, I kind of want to do Reiki, but I just don't think that I'm the right kind of person. And I'm like, are you a person? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because as I said, this is our birthright. It's natural to us. It's so natural. Like when we stub our toe or we have a headache and we go like this, that's basically, I mean, we're putting our hand there because it hurts. The only difference is that with Reiki, you're consciously intending to send healing energy to that place
Right.
through your. You also don't even have to use your hands. Um, Reiki is totally accessible to people who would even, not have, limbs. Like you could still just kind of intend for divine energy to come into your body through your crown chakra, through your root chakra, even absorbing into your body like a sponge through every
Yep.
pore, and then travel to any place in the body that feels pain.
Yep. And that's another interesting topic before we get into how you got started with Reiki. So, for people who think like, oh, I can't be a Reiki practitioner, or, like you just have to be born with that. It's like this mystical thing. Because I used to think that about chakra balancing too. Like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not like I don't know. I think you're born that way, right? I used to think that. What do you say about that?
I think there are people who are just a little bit more sensitive
Hmm.
and empathic, and um empath, the word on the whole kind of gets it's understood at a basic level as like somebody who would feel the emotions of somebody else, and we teach
Hmm.
that to our children. Like if your friend is crying, like please, try to find out why they're crying, and understand why they're crying, and that takes a little bit of empathy. For an empathic person, it's a little more heightened, so they're actually feeling it in their own body. And
Hmm.
the greatest thing that ever happened to me, and I know this is a little off topic, but I'm going to bring it back.
Nope, go ahead.
um, the best thing I ever learned that helped me understand myself is what's actually happening on an energetic level to an empath. Because an empathic person is very like kind of like aware of energies within the relational field. Like, we're in a 3D linear time space, right? We live on Earth. There's consensual reality here. And very aware of that, but also connected to kind of like this larger universal grid of energy that some people call the 5D consciousness. It's not a
Hmm.
different location or different dimension, but it's just like a 5D consciousness.
Yep.
Um, inside which we're kind of like much more energetically connected. So an empathic person is just a little bit more sensitive to that and a little bit more understanding of that, but they don't understand it as that's what it is. So then when they are interacting with somebody, maybe they're picking up on energy and like trapped emotions in that person, old trauma that's repressed, that person's not even conscious of, but the empathic person is hanging out with them and they can pick up on it, and they're like, they're sensing discord, something, there's a
Hmm.
disturbance in the force, right? And they're like, this was my refrain constantly as a child. Are you mad at me?
Yep.
And then maybe the person's like, no, I'm not. And they're like, oh, okay. Are you okay? I'm glad you're not mad at me. But they can still sense that discord. And
Yep.
they think that it's in real time. They think that it's an actual emotion their friend is experiencing in that moment, and it must be directed towards them. So then they ask, are you mad at me? And the friend says no. They're like, okay, either they're lying and I'm actually super annoying, and they don't have the heart to tell me how annoying I am. They're not actually my friend. Hello, Jessica Sharp in middle school. And then there's or I'm a bad judge of character. Like there must be something wrong with my brain. Like, and
Yep.
or both. And so our poor empaths, like they really don't, if they don't have the energetic understanding of that, then they must feel like, oh, it must be wrong with me. There's something wrong with me.
Mhm.
So on the flip side of that is that other people are like, well, that's not me. I'm not that empathic. I'm not that in tune with everyone's everything from decades ago. So therefore I can't be sensitive enough to practice any kind of energy healing. So it's like there's two losses happening.
Right,
One
right.
person thinks that they're losing it, and another person is like, well, I'm not, I don't do that, so I'm a robot. Like, that
Yep.
I can't ever access it. So it's I love that you're bringing this up. I love that you're bringing up like that it can, it really is available to anyone if you just have kind of like an open mind. If you are willing to do what we call kind of like just, being objective about
Mhm.
your feelings,
Yep.
and maybe self excavate a little bit of why you feel the way you do. Um, it doesn't require any kind of wizardry or
Yep.
like anything other than that, which is funny. I get asked a lot, is, Reiki witchcraft? And one of the first interviews I did was with a radio show in Africa. And that was what people kept saying, like, you shouldn't even have this girl on. You shouldn't interview her. It's witchcraft. It's not.
Yeah,
And it
and
just shows
they
like,
really are fearful.
yeah, there's a,
Mhm.
there's a big fear of it because it's, as of right now, outside the box. What's nice is that, I mean, I don't know how it is for chakra balancing, but for Reiki, I've been doing this for 8 years. And 8 years ago, when I began my practice, it was like, what is this? And
Right.
if you Googled Reiki, the first like hit that would come up was like from a website called Quack Watch. And it's like,
Oh.
it was like some debunking, like,
Uh-huh.
someone has a stick in their butt and like kind of like, I'm gonna write a blog post about how this is crap. And like, so that was basically like people's understanding of Reiki. In the last 8 years, it's just been this wave. And now it's much more mainstream. So instead of Reiki, what is that? I get, oh, Reiki, my cousin does that, which is really cool.
Right. It's interesting because that was like the 2012-ish, was that the like
Yeah,
Aquarian age,
2013. Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
so mm,
Oh my God, I'd never even realized that.
yep.
Thank you for
So
bringing that home for me.
mhm. Yeah, it was like around that time where there was like this giant remembering kind of,
Yeah.
collective. So
Mhm.
yeah, I can imagine when you're first starting, you're probably getting lots of looks and like, okay,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, if I think it also goes back to if you feel called to do that kind of work, then maybe there's a reason to explore it further. It's not saying like everyone on this earth is meant to be a Reiki practitioner just because we can. That's not for everyone. So yeah. Now I am interested to know a little bit more of how you got into it 8 years ago. And then let's touch on which I know we will, like who could benefit from this. So
Sure. Yeah. So thank you so much. You're blowing my mind that like brought up you brought up the 2012, and the people that, oh, maybe it's going to be the end of the world, and maybe in a little bit of a way it was, because it was like
yep.
this big sleep that we kind of woke out of.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the year my son was born in December of 2011, so like just after New Year's. It's so crazy that this is what you brought up. In 2012, he was weeks old. He's my second child, and I was I had really bad like mastitis. It's like a breast infection.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really sick. I had a very high fever. I couldn't get out of bed. My husband had the baby in the other room, and he was trying to calm him down, but nothing was really working. It was very fussy. And in desperation, I was like, okay, what if I just send him some good, loving mom energy through telepathy? I don't know what to do here. I'm crazed, sleep deprived mom. So just laying in bed, and I'm like, and he stopped crying. And I was like, okay, whatever.
Love
That was
that.
like such a fluke, right? Like, that's dumb. And then so I stopped, and he started crying again. And then I was like, okay. and he stopped crying. And we went back and forth like that for way too long because it was probably torturous to my child. But like that was like the kind of moment that I was like, maybe there's something to this. I had heard of Reiki before. A friend's mom in high school did it. So I'd heard people talk about what it was. I also knew that, as at that time I was a stay-at-home mom.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, when my kids get older, I'm gonna have to get some kind of job. I hadn't really had a career up until that point, but I knew I wanted to help people. And I was like, maybe Reiki could be the thing. So I did what everybody does, I went to the library and checked out a bunch of books. But they didn't really answer my questions. Like it just kind of made me want to learn more, which I think that's probably what books about Reiki are supposed to do, really.
Mhm.
Um, and I wanted to do it. I knew that I wanted to do it like as a career. Like this was something that I wanted. At the time I had big dreams. I was like, "Oh, I could become a Reiki practitioner and then I can go into prisons and I can go into like domestic violence shelters." And I was like naming off to my husband like the most trauma filled places, which he was a little bit nervous about. But he, I just had all these aspirations of like, I'm going to do this and this and it's going to be so great. But I knew in order to do that I would have to study really, really hard. um and I was looking for kind of more of an apprenticeship program
Mhm.
than a how Reiki is usually taught in North America, which is in kind of like a weekend for level 1, a weekend for level 2, and then a weekend for what's called your master level. Um, Luckily, I lucked out, and it really is true that saying, like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yes.
Oh my God! Like
Mhm.
I was so blessed that the exact program that I was looking for just happened to be starting up on Main Street in Laurel. Like
Oh my gosh.
yeah, so I did that program with my instructor, and then he brought me on to co-teach with him. It was the program was it was not a weekend. It was like basically like start from scratch. You don't know anything about Reiki.
Mhm.
Um, Learn how to sense energy in your hands. Like learn what that feels like to you because it's different for everybody.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like kind of learning like your individual way of sensing energy and then learning more of the Reiki techniques. So we met weekly for 2.5 hours from September all the way to June. So it was a 100-hour course.
Whoa,
Yeah, it
yeah.
was incredible. And then I got the benefit of getting to co-teach with him for another 2 years after that. He moved away. And then after a couple years of kind of getting my full-time sea legs and seeing more clients full time, then I now teach that program on my own. And what I've added in is like bringing in outside people too. So
Mhm.
my students get to practice not just on each other, but in the later months of the class, like we bring in what we call the invited public. So it's like people can sign up to come in, and
Oh my gosh.
it gives them kind of like the experience of it's like a mock client practitioner
Right. Mhm.
experience, but it's very low
Yeah.
stakes. It's very short, but they get to ask questions of somebody that they've never met and get comfortable, like kind of like, treating somebody that they've never met before. So yeah, it's such a blast. I absolutely love it.
Amazing. Are you able to do that now with COVID?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
good.
it
Okay.
was, I mean, we we're lucky. I'm lucky that, as I said, Reiki can be done distantly because it's more of a quantum level thing. So it's not ideal. I would much rather be with them to be able
Yeah.
to like confirm or deny or validate what they're feeling in their hand.
Yeah.
I can't do that part, but I taught them the distance healing techniques really early on. And now they're at the point, my current cohort is at the point where they are starting to see people who kind of join us in the online classroom, and I break them off into pairs. So they're still able to learn. And
Oh,
it's
good.
nice because I get to teach people who don't live in the immediate area.
Yeah, that's always the plus of the having to go virtual is there's a much bigger reach, but, you know, I prefer the in-person too. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. That is, oh, I love that story. And it's like you could dissect it like, what if you never got that infection? Or what if, the baby wasn't fussy?
Mm,
It's just you look back and you see the puzzle pieces that come together. So,
exactly. Like how like the divine was kind of like, okay.
sorry you have to be in pain, but trust me, it's going to work out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
So, who could benefit from Reiki? Because I find that some people, they're eyeing the spiritual practices and they're like, oh, that's for someone who is like a spiritual monk, or,
Mm,
it's not for like me, the everyday person with aches and pains or depression, anxiety.
yeah.
What do you say about that? Who can Reiki benefit?
Well, I would assume that you would kind of say the same thing about chakra balancing is that like pretty much anybody.
That's what I say, yep.
No,
Literally everyone,
no,
animals too, yeah.
yes, animals, babies.
Yep,
Um, so um I mean for somebody like what we're allowed to say as Reiki practitioners, because we can't especially as an unregulated modality. And
yeah,
in a lot of states it's unregulated. So it's not like we can claim that, oh, it's just like this, or it's just like that. But we can say it helps with pain management and stress relief. And that pretty much applies to the entire population. So if somebody's
yeah,
having, chronic migraines, or if they're, um, anybody from like, somebody who has like, oh, a little bit of a sinus infection, chronic migraines, lower back pain, all the way up to somebody who might be, going through cancer treatment. Um, anybody and anybody in between could really benefit from this.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes, people will look at these spiritual practices and they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I can go there one time and I'm gonna be completely fixed." And they'll go, and then it's like there needs to be continued treatment just like any other treatment plan. So, what do you have to say for the people who get discouraged after, like, I went one time to Reiki and it was cool, but, here I am still with migraines?
Yeah. So it's so interesting. This is a really interesting question. I love this. It really paints a picture of like how much I love what I do and also how bad at business I am. Because I don't want somebody to feel beholden to me, that they have to keep coming to me for
Yes,
years
for
on end.
sure.
And
Mhm.
when I was in my own training, I was taught that um, the half life of the injury or the half life of the pain is what you can expect. That's how long your treatment time to recovery is going to be with Reiki.
Mhm.
So if you go like weekly or every other week, you have to go weekly or every other week for half as long as you've been in pain for it to work. But one of my first clients was a man who had been in like had chronic back pain for 40 years. And I could not look this man in the face and say, well, you just got to keep coming back for 20 years. Like, yeah, I would never say that to somebody.
Yeah.
Luckily, we've been working together for 4 years and he's had leaps and bounds. So that
Right.
we can put that myth to bed that it's a half life of the injury.
Mhm.
But yeah, it does take some like consistency, I think, just because self-understanding is also not a one-time thing.
Mhm.
Self-understanding is a journey, it's a process, and Reiki is a really wonderful support for that process. That's why I love working with the chakra system like you do, because we can, if we understand ourselves energetically, if we understand like what emotions are being held where and why and where they came from and how do we usually deal with it, then we can start to change things, and that will have effects on our physical person, our physical
Yes.
body. Yeah.
Yes. It's like, you have stomach issues or you have thyroid issues, oftentimes that's some trapped emotion or energy that's stuck in there, and
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, and you brought up thyroid, and like that's so true, and kind of like the ways that we even interact like with the world around us can affect organs like
oh,
the
yeah.
thyroid, especially the endocrine system. Because
Yep.
I'm sure you've seen this too with like throat chakra stuff, and like maybe somebody has like always been used to being undermined or devalued, or told, no, your ideas are not good. I am the one. Maybe this is like a really overbearing parent, or like a
Mhm.
spouse, you know, that's kind of like just over demanding, or even like a really like very, very kind of like overbearing, like religious community, very conservative religious community, they get this messaging of like, you don't know what's right for you. Only I know what's right for you. You don't know what's right for you. And one of my favorite quotes from Deepak Chopra is, every cell in your body is eavesdropping on your thoughts. So you know this firsthand as a practitioner, that over time, as you internalize and internalize that, like, oh, I don't know what's right for me, only they are the ones who can make the right choices for me. My
Mhm.
choices aren't good. The thyroid, which is the regulatory organ that's in charge of all the basic functions, is going to be like, yeah, I guess I don't know how to do my job
Yep.
either, and it's going to
Mhm.
shut down, and then you get hypothyroidism. And it's like, you know, I one of the things I love so much about our work is that we get to have these conversations with people that doctors are not having.
Nope, they're not. They're not having them, which is great because and I say it all the time, I'm not anti-Western medicine, but it is very emergency oriented.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that if we get into a God forbid an accident, they can perform life saving surgeries on us. But for those chronic illnesses, Western medicine is not equipped. It's not designed to deal with that.
Yeah.
And when we think that's our only option, we'll end up on prescription medication for years on end, which if that's what you know at the time, then of course that's your journey, whatever. um but I just I hope that people are become more open to these healings and understanding that the mind, the body, the energy body, the spirit, it's not all separate. So we can't go to our our traditional doctor for stomach ulcers and we're seeing our therapist because we're so stressed out and never linking the two
Yeah.
together.
Yes.
And so, yeah, and the ancient medicine, especially Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, like they knew this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They knew it all along. It was all one body working together. It was never any separation or compartmentalizing. And so, yeah, you said something about how each cell in your body is eavesdropping. And I tell people all the time, like, whatever you tell yourself is true.
Yeah.
If you tell yourself, oh, I can't do this or I'm not good enough for this, it's true
Mm-hmm.
because your body will adapt to what you tell it. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And those conversations, like, you know, I don't mean to say like somebody says like, oh, like I've been, you know, they internalize something and therefore th- their thyroid becomes hypoactive or underactive. Um, when I'm having these conversations with people, I'm really careful to tell them, like, of course, this is what happened because this is what you have been fed and conditioned to believe.
Yeah.
However, you are not to blame for your illnesses.
No, no, no,
Um,
no.
yeah. So, but then it's like exciting because because it's not like a blame game at that point. It's more of like, oh, what are the things that I've internalized that aren't actually true, and how can I begin to kind of like decouple myself from those?
Yeah.
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 It's
And even the environmental toxins in the foods we eat,
yeah.
we can do our best to eat clean, but we just live in a day and age where we aren't getting the same nutrients that our ancestors were getting. And so the foods we eat and things we consume 100% has an impact on our energy and different organs in our body and things like that. And yeah, so that is one of the main things that attracted me to I hate calling it alternative healing because for so long it just was the primary
Yeah, it was just
system.
thing. Thank you.
But the alternative world, it just gives you such a bigger picture, and you're not left with so many missing pieces and you're not left feeling so helpless. Like, yeah, it might be hard to hear that what you've been fed is maybe contributing to thyroid issues.
Mhm.
But it's also in my opinion, better than hitting all these different specialists, getting no answers, having to try these medications, which of course still see your doctors.
Mhm.
But the idea is just be open to exploring, well, what else is out there that was the norm for so long?
So yeah, for thousands of years. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
So, what can we do at home? Do you have any self-healing techniques that are Reiki,
yeah.
you know?
So what I do is, oh man, it's so funny. Like I, for the longest time, for years, people said, you need to have a daily practice. You need to have a daily practice. And I'm like, my schedule and my brain, like they don't, like I'm not a schedule person. Like it's really hard for me. That just the idea of having a daily practice was too daunting. Um, but what I've been doing now during the pandemic is like, just for instance, right? Like I'll kind of go over to my altar in the morning and just place one hand on my heart and one hand on my solar plexus and
Mhm.
just breathe deeply. And what I find is key with Reiki is like, okay, yes, it's breathing and that's wonderful, but there's also like a Mr. Rogers' Land of Make Believe, like visualization piece to it, that is key for me anyway. And so I'll place my hands here, and as I'm breathing, I'm imagining that divine energy is kind of like pouring down into my body, and that I'm drawing it up from the earth
Mhm.
like a tree
Yes.
would
Yep.
draw it, right? And and then it's I kind of just like feel into that and how it feels. Does it feel like as I'm drawing the energy in that it's able to kind of, come up into me? Is it getting stuck somewhere? Am I suddenly in pain when I pay attention? These are the kinds of things that I try to pay attention to in my what is now a daily practice. um Other people, like if somebody is not on, having daily practice isn't your jam, that's fine. But maybe when you're going to sleep, that's another really wonderful time to kind of
Mhm.
check in with yourself. So you can place hands wherever is comfortable, or you don't have to put your hands anywhere. Just get comfortable for sleep. I sleep on my side, so for me it would be like this. And then as you're falling asleep and as you're doing that deep breathing, again, just kind of imagine that there's like waves of divine energy washing over you.
Mhm.
The visualization piece is really key. So any visualization somebody could do, that's like, even if it's to imagine that there's like pain somewhere, and then that pain is kind of like dissolving. That's another one.
Mhm.
Well, for me, when I run into a wall, which I'm known to do, just kind of imagine it like dissolving. That really helps.
Love that. Love that so much. Thank you. So, where can we find you? I'm going to link everything, but if somebody wants to maybe reach out to you for some questions or even book a session,
Yeah,
what would
so
that look
really easy
like?
to find. It's Gentle Hands Reiki. Reiki is spelled Reiki. So Gentle Hands Reiki, all one word.com. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and
Yes.
Facebook at the same handle. So it's at Gentle Hands Reiki. And that if you go to the website, there's information on all the different classes that I teach. Because I do teach that mentorship program, but I also teach workshops on self-care and actually teaching people how to,
Ooh.
yeah, like how to, do a little bit more of the self-care techniques I talked about. um One thing I will say just before we close is that, with Reiki, and this having gone to Reiki 1, is that there is an attunement that's part of the learning process. An attunement is basically a guided meditation with a little bit of energy work thrown into the middle that is meant to widen your core of energy. So the kind of the water main of energy that runs between your chakras. So the self-care workshops that I teach incorporate that kind of attunement, and then also some teaching about how to help yourself.
Love that.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much. I'm going to put
Yeah.
everything in the description piece here.
Fantastic.
Jessica's awesome. She is so sweet. She answered my email like same day when I was just a rando a couple months ago. So yeah,
Oh,
she's awesome. So thank you again.
you're so welcome. I'm so excited to like be able to help you.
Yes.
Connecting people is kind of my favorite thing ever. I want to like
Mm.
put it on my sandwich and rub it in my hand. Like I love it. And I'm so glad it worked out for you. And thank you so much for today. This has been a blast.
Yes, I had a great time, and I don't know, maybe you'll see us again in the future.
I hope so. This is such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.